Okay, so I want you to imagine something for a second. Picture this. It's December 29, 2025. You're in Poland.
Hmm.
And when I say winter in Poland, I don't mean, a light dusting of frost on your windshield.
No, no, this is the real deal.
We're talking about that deep, biting cold that just seeps into the bones of the infrastructure itself. There's this severe weather system just sitting over the country, heavy snow, freezing winds, temperatures are dropping way, way below zero.
It's the kind of weather where the margin for error, it just vanishes. You're not using electricity for, like, convenience anymore. You're using it for actual survival.
Right.
The grid itself is physically heavy with ice on the lines. Demand is peaking because everybody's home. Heating systems are just blasting, and people are getting ready for New Year's Eve.
Exactly. It is the perfect storm. I mean, literally and figuratively. And right in the middle of all this, while people are maybe, wrapping up their holiday break or prepping for the New Year's countdown, something invisible but catastrophic begins to unfold.
A coordinated cyber attack hits the Polish energy sector.
And this wasn't just a nuisance, right? This wasn't some website defacement or a temporary outage we're talking about.
Not at all. The energy sector incident report that was released by CERT Polska, which is what we're really digging into today, it describes an event that was it was fundamentally different from what we're used to seeing.
Right, because usually when we talk about big hacks, especially the state-sponsored stuff, we're talking about espionage.
Yeah.
We're talking about stealing secrets, reading emails, maybe grabbing credit card numbers or, intellectual property.
Or ransomware. That's the other big bucket. Locking up your files and demanding a bag of crypto to maybe give them back.
But this was neither of those.
No. There was no ransom note. There was no exfiltration of trade secrets for some kind of market advantage. The report, it draws this chilling analogy that really sets the stage for everything we are going to discuss. They compare this attack to arson.
Arson. Wow, that is a heavy word.
It fits perfectly, though. Think about it. If ransomware is locking the doors and holding the furniture hostage, and espionage is like sneaking in at night to photocopy the diary in the nightstand, this attack was walking into the living room, pouring a jerry can of gasoline all over the floor, tossing a match, and just walking away.
They wanted to burn the house down.
They wanted irreversible destruction.
Yeah.
They wanted to break the machinery and the data in a way that couldn't just be, undone with a backup restore. They wanted to break the physical infrastructure itself.
And that really is the mission of this deep dive. We need to understand this shift. It feels like we're moving from a world of cyber spying to something that looks a lot like cyber warfare, or at the very least, cyber sabotage.
And the scale of it is what's truly frightening. We're not looking at one isolated server here. The report details 3 totally distinct target groups.
A broadside volley, then.
Completely. First, you had the renewable energy sector, and we're talking over 30 wind and solar farms.
30.
Then you had a massive combined heat and power plant, a CHP, which serves 500,000 residents.
500,000, okay.
And then, almost like it was collateral damage or just an opportunistic target, a manufacturing company got hit too.
And the methods,
Yeah.
they weren't all the same, were they? I mean, they didn't just use one playbook.
No. And that is what makes this report such a fascinating, if terrifying read. The attackers completely customized their approach. For the wind farms, it was a brutal smash-and-grab attack on the operational technology, the actual industrial hardware.
The OT?
The OT. But for the CHP plant, it was this sophisticated, slow-burn infiltration into the IT network that eventually, bled over into pure destruction.
Okay, so let's unpack this, and I think we have to start with the wind farms.
Yeah.
Because for most people, myself included, a wind farm is just those giant white fans you see out in the field.
Right.
You see them turning, they make power. But how do you hack that? How do you break a wind farm without taking a sledgehammer to it?
Well, you have to understand the anatomy of the grid first. A wind farm isn't just a collection of turbines spinning in the breeze. It's a power plant. And that power plant needs to be connected to the rest of the world. That connection point is called the GCP, the grid connection point.
Okay, the GCP, what does that actually look like? Is it a box? Is it a building?
Physically, it's usually a substation. It's a small building or a fenced-off area with a bunch of transformers and switchgear. It's where the voltage gets stepped up so it can travel down the high-tension lines.
Got it.
But digitally, it's the brain of the whole operation. It is the bridge. On one side, you have all the turbines generating raw power. On the other side, you have the distribution system operator, the DSO. That's the national grid controller.
So the DSO is the one telling the farm what to do, like an air traffic controller.
Exactly. The grid is a constant balancing act. If there's too much power on the lines, the DSO tells the farm, hey, throttle back a bit. If there isn't enough, they say, give us everything you've got. That whole conversation happens through the GCP. It concentrates all the data from the turbines and all the commands from the grid.
So if you control the GCP.
You control the flow, you control the visibility. If you blind the GCP, the grid operator has absolutely no idea what that wind farm is doing. And during a storm, with fluctuating winds and high demand, flying blind is incredibly dangerous.
And these substations, these GCPs, they aren't manned, right? I mean, there isn't a security guard sitting in a little booth checking IDs.
No, not a chance, especially not with over 30 of them spread all across the countryside. They're remote, they're unmanned. And because they're remote, they rely completely on internet connections for management and control.
Which brings us to the front door. The report identifies a very, very specific piece of hardware that was the weak link in every single one of these renewal facilities.
The FortiGate VPN concentrators.
Now, Fortinet is a big name. I mean, they make serious enterprise-grade security gear. So was the device itself broken, or was it how it was set up?
It is the classic story of the tool being only as good as the user. The hardware is more than capable. The configuration was, well, negligent is probably the most polite word for it.
The report mentions that these VPN interfaces, so the digital front doors, were just exposed to the open internet.
Which is bad, but not necessarily fatal if you have really strong locks. But they didn't have strong locks. They didn't even have deadbolts. They weren't using multi-factor authentication, MFA.
In 2025,
Yeah.
on critical energy infrastructure. Are you kidding me?
I know, it sounds absolutely unbelievable. I mean, we have MFA on our bank accounts, our email, our video game accounts, for crying out loud. But here, protecting the power grid, it was just single factor, username and password.
And I'm guessing the passwords weren't exactly, 60-character strings of random noise.
It's so much worse than just weak passwords. It was credential reuse. The report highlights that the companies managing these farms, who are often third-party operators, by the way, were using the same accounts and the exact same passwords across multiple facilities.
Oh, wow. So it's the skeleton key problem.
Precisely. Imagine you're the attacker. You manage to phish one technician, or you guess one weak password for just one wind farm, and suddenly you don't just have access to that one farm, you realize, hey, this key, it works on the farm in the next county, on the one up in the north, and oh, look, it works on the solar plant down in the south.
You hack one, you get 30 for free.
And once they were in, they had administrator-level privileges on these FortiGate devices. They owned the gateway, and on December 29th, as part of this coordinated strike, they didn't just use the gateway, they torched it.
What do you mean destroyed it, like physically?
No, digitally destroyed. They executed a factory reset command on the devices. They wiped the configurations completely.
So, okay, the legitimate operators are sitting in their nice worn control center. They see all the alarms going off. They try to log in to see what's happening.
And nobody answers the door because the door doesn't exist anymore. The device has reverted to its out-of-the-box factory state. It has no IP address configuration, no user accounts, no VPN tunnels. It's a brick, a very expensive brick.
And because it's a remote site?
You have to send a human being out there in a snowstorm.
I'm starting to see the theme here. The attack wasn't just about stopping the data flow. It was about maximizing the pain of recovery.
Time to recovery is a real metric in cyber warfare, just like it is in business continuity. If you can make the recovery time days instead of minutes, you have won a huge tactical victory.
Okay, so the gateway is gone, but the attackers are already inside. They've moved past the lobby, and they are now in the machine room. This is where we get into the OT sabotage, the operational technology. The report details attacks on specific industrial controllers. Let's start with the Hitachi RTUs.
Right, the remote terminal units. These are the workhorses. The RTU is the device that physically wires into the circuit breakers and the temperature sensors. It takes a digital command, like open switch, and turns it into an electrical impulse that actually opens the physical switch.
The hands of the system.
The hands and nerves, yeah.
The report describes a fake firmware attack on these Hitachi units. This sounded incredibly sci-fi to me. Can you walk us through how this works?
It is so devious. So the attackers have network access. They navigate to the web interface of the Hitachi RTU 560. They need to log in. And guess what username they used?
Oh, please don't say admin.
They used a user account named Default.
The username was literally default.
Yes, capital D. And you can bet the password was the default password that comes printed in the manual. And of course, this account had the privileges to perform firmware updates.
And firmware is the software that lives permanently on the chip, right? It's the device's brain.
It is. It's the operating system for the hardware. It tells the hardware how to be a computer. If you corrupt the firmware, the hardware is just a paperweight. So the attackers uploaded a file that they claimed was version 13.5.3.0.
Oh, is that a real version?
Nope. The facility was running an older version. The attackers just faked the version number to trick the device into accepting this update. But the file itself wasn't a real update. It was a weapon. They took a standard firmware file and they modified the very, very beginning of it. They inserted 240 bytes of data right at the program entry point.
The program entry point, that's the very first instruction the processor tries to run when it boots up.
That's the one. When the device wakes up, its processor goes to that specific memory address and says, okay, what's my first job? Usually the instruction is something like initialize memory or start the kernel. The attackers replaced that with 240 bytes of 0xFF.
0xFF, we saw that in the report. What does that mean in plain English for us?
In the language of computers, which is binary, 0xFF is 8 ones in a row, 11 and 11 and 11. In the specific processor architecture used by these Hitachi devices, 0xFF is essentially an invalid command. It's gibberish. Or, depending on the specific chip, it's an instruction that triggers an immediate, unrecoverable fault.
So they fed the brain junk food.
They lobotomized it. The processor wakes up, it loads the corrupted firmware, it tries to read that very first instruction, it sees a 0xFF, it panics, and it throws a fatal fault. Now, when a fatal fault happens, the safety mechanism built in says, whoa, something is terribly wrong, let's reboot and try again.
So it reboots.
It reboots, it loads the firmware, it reads 0xFF, it panics, it reboots.
It's stuck in an infinite loop of death.
Exactly. The device is bricked, it's completely unresponsive.
And because it's a firmware issue, you can't just remote in and fix it. The brain is broken before it even learns how to talk.
You can't talk to it because the part of it that knows how to use the network is the part that's crashing. You have to physically go to the device, probably replace the entire processor card, or use a specialized hardware tool called a JTAG programmer to force flash the chip.
Again, requiring a truck roll in a blizzard.
And here's the kicker. This is the part that makes security experts want to just pull their hair out. The Hitachi RTU 560 actually has a security feature called Secure Update.
Let me guess, it wasn't turned on.
If Secure Update is enabled, the device checks a digital cryptographic signature before accepting any new firmware. If the file had been tampered with, like, say, having 240 bytes of garbage shoved into the header, the signature won't match, and the device will just reject the update.
And it wasn't enabled.
The report says, and I'm quoting, none of the devices had this feature enabled. It was turned off. By default, it's like buying a tank and leaving the hatch wide open.
That is just tragic. It really is. So the Hitachi units are bricked, but they didn't stop there. They also went after Micronica RTUs.
Different brand, same result. These Micronica units run a version of Linux that's embedded on the chip. So the attackers logged in via SSH secure shell again, almost certainly using default root credentials, and they just deleted everything.
The digital equivalent of setting fire to the filing cabinet.
Pretty much. They ran a command to recursively delete the entire file system. They were even thorough enough to delete the .bash history file, which is the log file that records what commands you typed. So we don't know the exact command they used, but we sure know the result. The device was wiped clean, no operating system, no configuration, nothing. Just a hollow shell.
There was one other device attack in the wind farms that I found really bizarre. The Moxa serial device servers. The report describes what they did as, well, it almost feels like a prank, but a really nasty one.
It does feel like a troll move, doesn't it? So these Moxa devices, they're basically converters. They take old equipment that speaks via serial cables. Think of those old 1990s printer cables, and they connect them to the modern IP network. The attackers logged in, factory reset them, and changed the password. That's pretty standard. But then they changed the IP address configuration.
They changed the IP to 127.0.1.
Yes. For those listening who aren't networking nerds, 127.0.0.1 is a special reserved address. It's called localhost. It always refers to me. If your computer tries to connect to 127.0.0.1, it's just connecting to itself.
So they told the device, your address is myself.
Exactly. So now this little box is sitting on the network, but it thinks its address is myself. If you try to send a command to it from the control center, it never arrives. If it tries to send data out, it just sends it back to itself. It completely vanishes from the network.
It's just shouting into a mirror.
And once again, because you can't connect to it over the network to fix the network settings,
They had to drive out there.
you have to drive out there, plug a laptop physically into the console port with a serial cable, and manually type in the correct IP address. It is a specific tactic designed to exhaust the defenders. They knew that in a massive storm, the DSOs wouldn't have enough staff to drive to 30 different remote sites at the same time.
It's strategic paralysis.
Precisely.
So we have the gateways wiped, the RTUs bricked, the converters are talking to themselves, and finally, the screens themselves, the HMIs, the human-machine interfaces.
These are the Windows PCs where the operators would actually look at the graphs and click the buttons. In this case, they were running software called CISO.
How did they get malware onto these? These are usually pretty locked down behind firewalls, right?
They were. But remember, the attackers already had the keys to the kingdom. The report shows a really interesting timeline. On December 8th, that's weeks before the main attack, they logged into these Windows machines. They created a new firewall rule, and they named the rule Microsoft Update.
Oh, that is sneaky. Because if I'm a sysadmin scrolling through 1,000 rules, I'm definitely not going to delete Microsoft Update.
Of course not. It looks totally legitimate. But what that rule actually did was open port 445 SMB, that's the file sharing port. It allowed the attackers to remotely drop files onto the machine from anywhere else in the network. So on December 29th, they simply copied a file called source.exe onto the desktop and executed it.
And source.exe was the payload?
That was DynaWiper, and we will absolutely get into the nasty guts of that piece of code in a minute.
So just to recap the wind farm situation here. You have 30 plants, the brains are fried, the gateways are reset, the screens are wiped. What happened to the lights? Did the power go out?
That is the miracle here. No, the lights stayed on, the wind turbines kept spinning.
How is that even possible?
Industrial inertia. A wind turbine is designed to keep doing what it was last told to do until it gets a new command or some safety limit is triggered. Since the brains that send the commands were dead, the turbines just kept on generating at their last set point.
So the car is doing 70 miles an hour down the highway, but the driver has just jumped out the window.
And the steering wheel is gone, and the entire dashboard is black. The grid operator, the DSO, was flying completely blind. They couldn't see the generation data, they couldn't send stop commands. If the wind had picked up to dangerous levels, they couldn't have feathered the blades to slow them down. If the grid had become unstable, they couldn't have disconnected the farms to protect the rest of the network.
That is a terrifyingly precarious position to be in.
The report says explicitly, while grid stability wasn't compromised this time, the attackers absolutely had the access required to disrupt generation. They could have sent stop commands to all 30 farms a second before they bricked the units. They could have caused a massive frequency imbalance on the grid.
They held the gun to the head of the grid, but they didn't pull the trigger. They just broke the safety lock and walked away.
Which begs the question, was that intentional restraint? Or did they just want to cause maximum chaos and uncertainty?
Let's pivot to the second major target, the CHP plant, the combined heat and power plant. This is a much bigger beast than a wind farm.
Oh, much, much bigger. This facility provides heat and electricity to 500,000 people. If this goes down in the middle of a December blizzard, people don't just lose their Netflix, they freeze.
The story here feels different. The wind farms were a smash and grab, brutal and fast. The CHP attack feels more like a spy novel.
It was a long con. The timeline in the report shows the initial infiltration began way back in March of 2025. That is 9 months of dwell time inside their network.
9 months. What are they doing for 9 months? Just sitting there.
They're watching, they're learning, they are meticulously mapping the network. The report calls this phase living off the land.
Living off the land. I love that term. What does it mean in this context?
It means you're using the tools that are already there. If you break into a house and you bring a bag of lockpicks and a laser cutter, you look suspicious. But if you just use the kitchen knife that's already on the counter, you look like you belong.
Blending in.
Exactly. The attackers didn't bring in custom hacker tools at first. They used standard Windows commands that are on every single machine.
Like what kind of things?
Ping to check if a machine is online, and lookup to find IP addresses from names, netstat to see who is talking to who on the network. These are commands that system administrators use every single day. If the security software sees someone running ping, It doesn't trigger an alarm. It's just normal noise.
It's the perfect camouflage.
It is! They even use the Edge browser, the built-in Microsoft web browser, to download their scanning tools. They ran it in private mode.
How considerate of them.
Laughs, very private. They downloaded a tool called Advanced Port Scanner from legitimate services like Dropbox and Pastabin. They didn't host it on some malicious Russian server. They used cloud services that wouldn't be blocked by the company firewall.
And they were hunting for something specific, right? The report mentions a keyword.
Yes, they were filtering all their network scans for host names containing the string SCADA.
SCADA. Supervisory control and data acquisition. The industrial control systems.
They were hunting the control systems. They weren't looking for HR records. They weren't looking for the CEO's emails. They were looking for the controls for the boilers and the turbines.
And eventually, they managed to compromise the domain controller. I know enough about IT to know that that's basically the game over scenario.
The domain controller holds all the keys to the entire kingdom. It manages all the users, all the computers, all the passwords. The attackers used a really clever technique to dump the ntds.diet file.
ntds.diet. That sounds very technical.
It's the database file that lives deep inside Active Directory. It contains every username and the hash of every password in the entire organization. But you can't just copy it because the system keeps it locked while Windows is running.
So how did they get it?
They used a tool called viceadmin, which stands for Volume Shadow Copy. It's a backup tool built right into Windows. They told the server, hey, can you make a backup snapshot of the hard drive for me? And the system said, sure. Then they just copied the ntds.diet file from the backup snapshot, where it wasn't locked.
Using the system's own backup tools against it.
Living off the land. Once they had that file, they could crack all the passwords offline. They had everyone's credentials. They also performed something called a Kerberos attack using a tool named Rubius. They created what's known as a diamond ticket.
I've heard of a golden ticket attack. What makes a diamond ticket different?
It's a subtle but important evolution. A golden ticket is a completely forged authentication token. It works, but it can look suspicious to advanced monitoring tools because it's kind of created from scratch. A diamond ticket takes a legitimate ticket that was issued by the server, decrypts it, modifies it to say, by the way, I am an admin now, and then re-encrypts it using the server's own keys. It looks much more authentic. It's way harder to spot.
So they have total persistence. They have all the keys. They've mapped the SCADA systems. Then comes December 29th, the destruction phase.
Right. They decide to deploy the malware, DynaWiper, again. But at the CHP plant, they used the company's own IT management system to do it. They created a group policy object, a GPO.
Which is what IT normally uses to, like, install updates or change everyone's desktop wallpaper.
Exactly. They created a policy that said, attention all computers on the network. Please download this file, source.exe, and run it immediately.
But this is where the story takes a fascinating turn. Unlike the wind farms, the CHP plant had defenses that actually fought back.
Yes. This is the one real glimmer of hope in the whole report. The CHP plant had a modern EDR solution, an endpoint detection and response tool.
Like a really advanced antivirus.
Think of it more as a flight recorder and a security guard all rolled into one. This EDR had a feature called canary files.
Like a canary in a coal mine.
That's exactly it. The EDR software sprinkles these little fake files all over the hard drive. They look like Excel spreadsheets or Word documents, but they're just bait. No human user would ever touch them. But a wiper malware, it doesn't know the difference. It just blindly grabs the canary file and tries to overwrite it.
And the trap springs.
The moment that process touched the canary file, the EDR screamed, malicious activity, and terminated the process. The report says this single feature saved over 100 machines at the CHP plant from being wiped.
That is a huge win for the defenders. Finally.
It was, but the attackers were watching. They were live on the keyboard. They saw their wiper failing. They saw the EDR blocking them. So they improvised. And this improvisation, to me, is the single scariest part of the whole report.
The tiny core Linux maneuver.
Yes. They realized they couldn't wipe the servers from within the Windows operating system because the EDR was too strong. So they decided to step outside of Windows entirely. They accessed the critical servers using their KVM interface.
KVM keyboard, video, mouse. That's the remote management card, right? The thing that lets you control a server even if the OS is crashed.
Correct. It's like being physically in the data center, standing in front of the server rack. They used the KVM to mount a virtual CD-ROM drive, but they didn't put a Windows CD in it. They uploaded an ISO image for tiny core Linux.
Which is a super tiny stripped-down operating system.
It boots in seconds. They force the servers to reboot, but instead of booting into Windows, they booted into this tiny Linux OS. Now think about what that means. The server's on, the hard drives are spinning, but Windows is not running. The EDR software is not running.
The watchdog is asleep.
The watchdog doesn't even exist in this reality. The attackers open a terminal window, and they type the DD command.
Indeed, I've heard this called the disk destroyer.
That's a good name for it. It's a standard utility for copying data byte for byte. But they typed a command that was roughly like this: ddf div of davesta.
Can you translate that for us?
Read data from the source of infinite random numbers, so pure garbage noise, and write it directly to the first physical hard drive.
It doesn't look for files, doesn't care about folders.
No. It writes to the raw magnetic sectors of the disk. It overwrites the partition table, the file system, the boot sector, absolutely everything. It turns the hard drive into a paperweight filled with digital static.
That is just brutal efficiency.
And just to be absolutely sure, they also used Intel Rapid Storage technology tools to try and wipe the RAID configurations themselves. They wanted to destroy the logical structure of the storage array.
This shows a level of determination that is just chilling. Plan A failed. Okay, no problem. Here's Plan B. Plan B requires advanced Linux knowledge and hardware-level access. We'll do it live.
It proves this wasn't some automated script they just fired off. This was a human adversary, reacting in real time, absolutely determined to burn that plant's IT systems to the ground.
Let's talk about the weapons themselves, the malware. We have mentioned DynaWiper a few times. The report calls it the professional tool. What makes a piece of wiper malware professional?
It's all about the code quality and the design choices.
Yeah.
DynaWiper is a native Windows binary. It's compiled C++ code, so it's fast and efficient. But what's really fascinating is how weirdly polite it is.
Polite. It destroys all your data.
Laughs. I know, it sounds crazy, but look at how it behaves. When it scans the hard drive to decide what to delete, it explicitly skips certain folders. It has a hard-coded exclusion list. It skips C Windows, boot, and System32.
Why? Why would a destroyer save the operating system?
Because the malware needs the operating system to run. If the very first thing you do is delete System32, the computer instantly crashes. You get the blue screen of death. If the computer crashes, the malware stops. By preserving the OS, the attackers ensure the computer stays alive and responsive for hours.
Allowing the malware to finish the job of destroying everything else.
Exactly. It keeps the host alive just long enough to eat its soul. It deletes your documents, your databases, your pictures, your backups. But it leaves the hollow shell of Windows running so you can, in theory, watch it happen.
That is incredibly dark.
It's also really efficient in how it destroys. It uses something called the Mersenne twister algorithm, a very good random number generator. It doesn't overwrite the entire file because writing terabytes of zeros takes a really long time. Instead, it just writes random garbage to different chunks of the file.
Just enough to corrupt it beyond repair.
Right. If you overwrite the first 4 kilobytes of a database file with random noise, that database is gone. It's unrecoverable. It's a speed over thoroughness approach designed for maximum damage in minimum time.
Now, contrast that with the malware found at the third target, the manufacturing company. The report calls this one LazyWiper.
LazyWiper is the perfect name. The analysts were clearly unimpressed with this one. This wasn't a sleek, compiled binary. It was a PowerShell script that wrapped some raw C# code inside it.
And the report suggests something very interesting about who or what wrote this code.
Or what wrote it, exactly. The analysts found all these strange artifacts in the code. The indentation was all over the place. The variable names were really generic. But the smoking gun was the comments in the code.
The comments, the notes the programmer leaves.
Yep. Programmers leave notes in code to explain what a certain part does. The comments in LazyWiper were just nonsensical. They described functionality that didn't actually exist, or they used phrasing that sounded very unnatural, very synthetic.
You think it was written by an AI?
The consensus from the report is that it was likely generated by a large language model. Someone probably went to a tool like ChatGPT or a more shady equivalent and typed in a prompt like, write me a C# function to recursively find all documents and overwrite them with random bytes.
So the barrier to entry for committing cyber arson is now just being able to write a decent prompt.
It certainly seems to be getting lower, and the result was sloppy. LazyWiper overwrites 2/3 of every file it touches. That is incredibly slow and inefficient. It creates a ton of disk activity. It's loud, digitally speaking, but it works.
It did have one smart feature, though. The report mentions a safety switch.
It did. Before it starts running, it checks the computer's host name. If the host name contains the string PDC, which likely stands for primary domain controller, it just exits. It refuses to run.
Self-preservation again. Don't burn the ship you're sailing on.
They didn't want to accidentally crash the domain controller while the script was still using it to spread to other computers. They needed the mothership to stay online to coordinate the attack across the whole network.
So we have the wind farms bricked with fake firmware. We have the CHP plant partially saved by an EDR, but then hammered with low-level Linux tools. We have this random manufacturing company hit with what looks like AI-generated malware. The big question that's left is, who did this?
Attribution, always the hardest part of the job.
The report points the finger pretty directly at a group they call Static Tundra.
Static Tundra, you might know them by their other names: Berserk Bear, Dragonfly, Ghost Blizzard. They are a well-known Russian Nexus threat group that has been active for over a decade.
But usually when we hear about Dragonfly or Berserk Bear, we're hearing about spying, espionage.
Exactly. For years, they've been the spies of the energy sector. They break into power companies, they steal network diagrams, they take screenshots of control panels. They want to know how the grid works, presumably for intelligence gathering or for leverage in a future conflict.
But they don't usually pull the trigger. They just map out where the triggers are.
Until now. That is the massive, fundamental shift this report highlights. The infrastructure used in this attack, the IP addresses, the VPN servers, the command and control nodes, all of it maps back to known static Tundra clusters. But the behavior was pure sabotage.
The report also mentions a connection to Sandworm.
Ah, Sandworm. The heavy hitters. These are the guys who actually turned off the lights in Ukraine in 2015 and again in 2016. They are the saboteurs. They're known for destruction.
So how are they connected here? Did they team up?
The connection is in the tooling. The malware loader, the little script used to launch DynoWiper, bore a striking resemblance to a tool called ArguePatch, which is a known Sandworm specialty.
So what does that mean? Is it a collaboration? A crossover episode?
It suggests a blurring of the lines. It could be Static Tundra borrowing or stealing tools from Sandworm. It could be shared personnel between the groups. But the implication is clear, and it's worrying. The groups that used to just watch are now starting to burn. The Cold War of cyber espionage seems to be heating up.
And we absolutely cannot ignore the timing. December 29th.
The timing is absolutely strategic. It's the holiday lull. IT and security teams are on vacation or running on skeleton crews. Response times are going to be slower. And physically, it's the middle of a brutal winter storm.
They weaponized the weather.
They absolutely did. They knew that disrupting heating systems in late December would cause maximum panic and maximum physical danger. This wasn't just about deleting data. This was about the potential to freeze people in their homes.
So where does this all leave us? We've walked through the attack, the tools, the targets. What's the big takeaway for someone listening to this?
I think there are two main lessons here. One is very technical and the other is, well, it's geopolitical. Technically, defaults kill. The user account named default on the Hitachi, the default admin password on the HMI, the default root on the Micronica, the reused passwords across 30 sites.
It's the digital equivalent of leaving the key under the doormat.
It's worse than that. It's leaving the door wide open with a giant neon sign that says, "Come on in." If these organizations had simply enforced multi-factor authentication and changed the default passwords, 90% of this attack would have failed. The attackers never would have gotten past the front door.
And the geopolitical lesson.
The rules are changing. We used to operate under the assumption that critical infrastructure was a red line that nation-states wouldn't cross because of the risk of massive escalation. This attack shows that that line is getting very, very blurry. Threat actors are now willing to risk physical destruction as a tool of statecraft.
It's a sobering thought. We are really entering an era where cybersecurity isn't just about protecting your credit card number. It's about keeping the lights on and keeping the heat running.
And it highlights that our incredibly sophisticated, modern digital grid is often protected by some very fragile, very human decisions made years ago.
I just keep thinking about that technician. The person who had to get in a truck, driving through a blizzard with a laptop on the passenger seat, heading out to some frozen wind farm in the middle of nowhere to plug a cable into a serial port, all because a hacker, thousands of miles away, changed a 1 to a 0.
It's a powerful reminder that the cloud is just someone else's computer, and the grid is just a bunch of wires managed by people. And when the digital fails, we are right back to the physical world very, very quickly.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on. If an espionage group like Static Tundra, a group that has spent a decade just watching, has now decided to start destroying. What else have they been watching? What other systems have they been dwelling in for 9 months or 9 years, just waiting for the right political moment to light the match?
That is the question that keeps people in my field up at night.
On that cheery note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. We hope this gave you a clear picture of what actually happened in Poland and why it really matters to everyone, everywhere. Check your passwords, turn on MFA, and maybe buy an extra blanket.
And for God's sake, update your firmware.
And update your firmware. Thanks for listening. We'll see you in the next deep dive.